When Emily Carter first set foot in Willow Creek, she felt like she had stepped into a dream. After years of saving and planning, she finally owned her very own home, a charming little house with 3 bedrooms, a cozy kitchen, and the crown jewel of the property, a sparkling pool in the backyard. It wasn't just any pool. It was the kind you'd see in glossy magazines or on TV shows about perfect suburban life. The water shimmered under the sun, inviting her to take a dip whenever she pleased. For Emily, this house represented everything she had worked so hard for: stability, comfort, and happiness. But as excited as Emily was about her new home, there was one thing she didn't pay much attention to when signing the papers: the Homeowners Association, or HOA. In fact, she barely skimmed through the thick packet of rules and regulations that came with the purchase agreement. Who could blame her? She was too busy imagining lazy summer afternoons by the pool and cozy winter nights curled up by the fireplace. Little did she know, those seemingly harmless pages would soon become her greatest source of frustration and even heartbreak. Willow Creek seemed like a peaceful neighborhood at first glance. Rows of neatly trimmed lawns lined the streets, children played outside until dusk, and neighbors greeted each other warmly during evening walks. But beneath its idyllic surface lay a web of strict rules enforced by none other than Karen Thompson, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. Karen wasn't just your average HOA president. She ruled Willow Creek with an iron fist, micromanaging every detail of the community's appearance and behavior. To Karen, the HOA wasn't just about maintaining property values. It was her personal kingdom, and she expected everyone to follow her commands without question. Emily initially tried to stay out of trouble. She kept her lawn tidy, parked her car in the driveway instead of the street, and made sure her trash bins were always tucked away neatly behind her garage. But no matter how careful she was, something always seemed to rub Karen the wrong way. It started small: a note taped to her door reminding her to trim her hedges, which weren't even overgrown, or a warning about leaving her porch light on past midnight. At first, Emily brushed these off as minor annoyances. Surely, Karen didn't mean any harm, right? Wrong. It wasn't long before Karen's nitpicking escalated into outright hostility. One sunny Saturday morning, Emily decided to give her front door a fresh coat of paint. Tired of the boring beige color it came with, she chose a cheerful shade of yellow that reminded her of sunshine and lemonade. As she stood back to admire her handiwork, she felt proud of herself. The house looked brighter, friendlier, and more welcoming than ever before. Or so she thought. The next day, a letter arrived in her mailbox. It was from Karen, written in her signature condescending tone. Apparently, yellow doors were not part of the approved color palette outlined in Section 4, Subsection C, of the HOA guidelines. Emily was ordered to repaint her door immediately, or face a fine of $250. Stunned, Emily flipped through the rule book, searching for the section Karen mentioned. Sure enough, there it was, a list of acceptable colors, all bland shades of gray, white, and tan. No yellows allowed. Frustrated but unwilling to cause a scene, Emily complied. She repainted her door a dull taupe, swallowing her pride along with her disappointment. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was targeting her specifically. After all, plenty of other houses in the neighborhood had colorful shutters or flower boxes that clearly violated the same rules. Why was Karen singling her out? Things only got worse from there. A few weeks later, Emily hosted a small barbecue for some friends. It was nothing extravagant, just a handful of people chatting and laughing while burgers sizzled on the grill. But apparently, someone complained about the excessive noise, because the following Monday another letter showed up in her mailbox. This time the fine was $500. Excessive noise? Really? All they had done was laugh a little too loudly. By now, Emily was starting to realize that living in Willow Creek came with strings attached, strings controlled by Karen Thompson. Every interaction with her left Emily feeling smaller, angrier, and more determined not to let Karen win. She began keeping meticulous records of every notice, every fine, and every conversation she had with Karen. If push came to shove, She wanted proof of Karen's unreasonable behavior. Little did she know, things were about to escalate far beyond fines and letters. Despite the growing tension, Emily refused to back down. She loved her home, the real version of it, not the sterile, cookie-cutter image Karen seemed obsessed with. And while she couldn't predict what Karen might do next, one thing was certain: Emily wouldn't let anyone take away her joy. Not without a fight. The clash between Emily and Karen wasn't just about paint colors or noise complaints. It was a battle of wills, personalities, and principles. While Emily valued individuality and personal freedom, Karen thrived on control, order, and uniformity. These opposing philosophies made their interactions explosive, turning what should have been minor disagreements into full-blown confrontations. What started as small annoyances quickly spiraled into something much bigger, affecting not only Emily's peace of mind, but also her sense of justice. One day, Emily decided to take matters into her own hands. Tired of feeling like she was walking on eggshells, she attended an HOA meeting for the first time. The meetings were held in the community center, a plain room with folding chairs arranged in neat rows and a podium at the front where Karen stood, clipboard in hand. As Emily walked in, she noticed how quiet the room became. Everyone seemed hesitant to speak up, nodding along as Karen rattled off updates about landscaping standards and parking restrictions. It was clear that most residents feared crossing her. When it was time for open discussion, Emily raised her hand cautiously. "Hi, I'm Emily Carter," she began, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "I wanted to talk about some of the recent fines I've received, specifically the one for painting my door yellow." Karen didn't miss a beat. With a smug smile, she flipped through her notes before responding. Yes, Ms. Carter. As you know, our guidelines are very specific about exterior colors. They're designed to maintain consistency and preserve property values. Your choice to disregard them was unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Emily echoed, her tone sharpening slightly. "It's just a door. How does a little yellow paint hurt anyone?" Karen's smile tightened, and her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "It's not just a door. It's part of the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. When people drive through Willow Creek, they expect a certain level of cohesion. You wouldn't want to be the reason someone decides not to buy here, would you?" Emily felt her cheeks flush with anger. She glanced around the room, hoping someone else might chime in to support her. But no one did. Instead, the other homeowners avoided eye contact, pretending to focus intently on their shoes or doodling absent-mindedly in their notebooks. It was as if they were afraid to breathe too loudly, let alone challenge Karen. Determined not to let Karen intimidate her, Emily pressed on. Section 4, subsection C says approved colors include gray, white, and tan. But nowhere does it say, those are the only options, and besides, plenty of houses around here have colorful accents. Flower boxes, shutters, even decorative stones. Why is my door such a big deal? Karen's expression shifted from condescending to icy. If you'd read the fine print, Ms. Carter, you'd see that exceptions require prior approval from the board. Clearly, you didn't bother seeking permission. I didn't think I needed permission to express myself, Emily shot back, her frustration bubbling over. This is my home. Shouldn't I have some say in how it looks? A murmur rippled through the crowd, though no one dared speak up directly. Karen cleared her throat loudly, silencing the whispers. Let me remind everyone that the purpose of these guidelines is to protect the integrity of our community. Without them, we risk chaos. Now, unless there's another topic someone would like to discuss. Her voice trailed off meaningfully, daring anyone to continue the conversation. Emily clenched her fists under the table but forced herself to stay calm. She knew arguing further wouldn't accomplish anything. Not in this room, anyway. Still, as she gathered her things and left the meeting early, she couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had declared war. And if Karen wanted a fight, Emily was ready to give her one. Over the next few weeks, the tension between them escalated. Emily installed solar panels on her roof, a decision she believed was both environmentally responsible and legally protected under state law. However, Karen saw it differently. Within days, Emily received yet another letter accusing her of violating the HOA's architectural guidelines. According to Karen, the panels disrupted the visual harmony of the neighborhood. Infuriated, Emily marched straight to Karen's house to confront her. She found Karen watering her immaculately manicured lawn, dressed in a crisp polo shirt and khakis. "Seriously?" Emily demanded, holding up the letter. "Solar panels violate visual harmony? That's ridiculous." Karen turned off the hose and gave Emily a patronizing smile. "I understand your desire to go green, Ms. Carter, but aesthetics matter. If everyone starts putting random additions on their roofs, it'll ruin the character of Willow Creek." "It's not a random addition," Emily countered. "It's clean energy, and guess what? State law overrides your precious HOA rules, I checked." Karen's smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "Well, good luck proving that," she said dismissively. "In the meantime, I suggest you familiarize yourself with our policies. Ignorance isn't an excuse." Emily stormed off fuming. She couldn't believe Karen's audacity or her blatant disregard for the law. But instead of letting Karen get the last word, Emily decided to dig deeper. She spent hours researching state regulations, consulting lawyers, and gathering evidence to prove that her solar panels were perfectly legal. Every time Karen tried to throw another obstacle in her path, Emily found a way to overcome it. Their arguments became legendary among the neighbors who whispered about them behind closed doors. Some admired Emily's courage, while others worried she was playing with fire. After all, Karen wasn't used to being challenged. She had always gotten her way, bending the rules to suit her whims and punishing anyone who dared defy her. Emily, however, refused to be intimidated. One evening, after yet another heated exchange, Karen leaned in close and hissed, "You really don't know when to quit, do you? Fine. Keep pushing me, Ms. Carter. Let's see where it gets you." Her words sent a chill down Emily's spine, but she refused to show fear. "Bring it on," she replied evenly. "Because I'm not going anywhere." Karen's glare softened into a smirk, and for the first time, Emily noticed something unsettling in her expression. It wasn't just anger, it was calculation. Whatever Karen had planned, Emily knew it wouldn't be pleasant. But she also knew one thing for sure. She wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. As the days passed, Emily braced herself for whatever Karen might throw at her next. She had no idea just how far Karen would go to assert her dominance or how devastating the consequences would be. But one thing was certain. This feud was far from over. The tension between Emily and Karen had reached a boiling point, but neither woman was willing to back down. What started as a series of petty disagreements had escalated into an all-out war, with both sides digging their heels in deeper each day. For Emily, it wasn't just about defending her right to make choices about her own home. It was about standing up to someone who seemed determined to crush her spirit. For Karen, it was about maintaining control over the neighborhood she viewed as her domain, and making sure no one else dared challenge her authority. One evening, after another exhausting HOA meeting where Emily had once again clashed with Karen, over the solar panels, Emily decided to take matters into her own hands. She knew arguing with Karen face-to-face wasn't getting her anywhere. Karen always found ways to twist the rules or dismiss Emily's points outright. So Emily came up with a plan. She would attend the next meeting armed with facts, figures, and legal documents proving that her solar panels were not only lawful, but also beneficial for the community. If Karen wanted to play hardball, Emily was ready to hit back harder. When the day of the meeting arrived, Emily walked into the community center carrying a thick folder filled with research. She wore her most professional outfit, a crisp blouse, and tailored slacks, determined to present herself as confident and prepared. As she took her seat among the other residents, she noticed the usual hush fall over the room. Everyone knew what was coming. Another showdown between Emily and Karen. Karen began the meeting as she always did, rattling off updates about landscaping guidelines and parking restrictions. But when it came time for open discussion, Emily didn't hesitate. She stood up holding her folder like a shield and addressed the group. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "I'd like to talk about my recent installation of solar panels on my roof." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward Karen. Emily could see the flicker of irritation in Karen's eyes, but she pressed on. As you may know, I received a notice claiming these panels violate our architectural guidelines. However, state law explicitly protects homeowners' rights to install renewable energy systems without interference from HOAs. In fact, several states have passed laws ensuring that communities like ours cannot penalize residents for going green. Karen's lips tightened into a thin line, but she remained silent, waiting for Emily to finish. Encouraged by this small victory, Emily continued. Not only are my panels legal, but they're also good for the environment and potentially for property values. Studies show that homes equipped with solar panels sell faster and at higher prices than those without them. This is a win-win situation for everyone. For a moment, the room stayed quiet. Then, slowly, a few people nodded in agreement. A man sitting near the back raised his hand tentatively. She's got a point, he said. My cousin installed solar panels last year, and his electricity bills practically disappeared. Maybe we should rethink some of these rules. Karen's face turned red, though whether from embarrassment or anger it was hard to tell. She gripped the podium tightly, her knuckles whitening. While I appreciate Ms. Carter's enthusiasm for environmental causes, she said through gritted teeth, we must prioritize the aesthetic integrity of our neighborhood. Solar panels are unsightly and detract from curb appeal. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Unsightly? She repeated, incredulous. They're barely visible unless you're standing directly under them. And even if they were noticeable, isn't saving the planet more important than how pretty your roof looks? A murmur rippled through the crowd, louder this time. Several people exchanged glances, clearly torn between siding with Emily and avoiding Karen's wrath. Sensing an opportunity, Emily pushed further. If aesthetics are such a concern, why don't we focus on enforcing the rules fairly, right? Now half the neighborhood has colorful flower boxes or decorative stones that technically violate the same guidelines Karen claims I broke. Why am I being singled out while others get away with much worse? Karen's jaw clenched, and her voice grew sharper. Let me remind everyone that the purpose of these meetings is to discuss community issues, not personal grievances. If Ms. Carter has a problem with how the HOA operates, perhaps she should consider moving elsewhere. The room erupted into whispers. Even Karen's closest allies looked uncomfortable, shifting awkwardly in their seats. Emily felt a surge of triumph, but also sadness. How could someone so obsessed with perfection be blind to the damage she was causing? Determined to have the last word, Emily took a deep breath and spoke directly to the audience. This isn't about me versus Karen, she said firmly. It's about fairness, about treating everyone equally, regardless of who they are or what Karen thinks of them. If we let one person dictate every aspect of our lives, we lose something far more valuable than curb appeal, our freedom. Her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, Karen seemed unsure of herself, glancing around the room as if searching for support. When none came, she abruptly ended the meeting, muttering something about needing to review the minutes later. As the crowd dispersed, a few neighbors approached Emily to offer quiet words of encouragement. One woman even slipped her a note saying, "Thank you for standing up to her. We've all been too afraid." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to Emily. Still, as she drove home that night, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done fighting. The look in Karen's eyes during the meeting had been cold and calculating, like a predator sizing up its prey. Whatever Karen had planned, Emily knew it wouldn't be pleasant. But she also knew one thing for certain. She wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. The next morning, Emily woke up to find workers unloading bags of cement in her driveway. Confused, she rushed outside only to see Karen supervising the operation with a smug grin. "What's going on here?" Emily demanded, her heart pounding. Karen crossed her arms and smirked. "Your pool violates safety codes due to improper fencing. Until you address the issue, we're filling it in for your protection." Emily's stomach dropped. This wasn't just retaliation, it was destruction. And as she watched the workers pour cement into her beloved pool, she realized the fight was far from over. The sight of cement being poured into her sparkling pool was like a punch to the gut for Emily. She stood frozen, watching as the pristine blue water disappeared beneath layers of gray sludge. Her heart raced, and her mind struggled to process what was happening. This wasn't just an over-the-top punishment, it felt personal, vindictive, and cruel. The pool had been more than just a feature of her backyard. It was a symbol of joy, relaxation, and everything she loved about her home. And now, in a matter of minutes, it was being destroyed right before her eyes. "Karen, stop this!" Emily shouted, rushing toward the workers. "You can't do this. My pool doesn't violate any safety codes. I fixed the fencing months ago." Karen turned to face her, arms crossed and lips curled into a smug smile. "Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Carter," she said mockingly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you think ignoring the rules would have no consequences? Your pool is a hazard. Plain and simple. We're taking care of it for you." Emily clenched her fists, trying to stay calm despite the anger bubbling inside her. "This is ridiculous. You're making up excuses because you're mad at me. Admit it, this has nothing to do with safety codes." Karen's smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "I don't need to admit anything. The HOA guidelines are clear, and your pool doesn't meet them. If you'd bothered to read the fine print or submit proper documentation, maybe we wouldn't be here." Emily's frustration boiled over. "You know exactly why I'm angry. You've been targeting me from day one, fines, warnings, threats, and now you're destroying my property. What gives you the right?" Karen shrugged nonchalantly, as if she couldn't care less about Emily's outrage. "It's not about rights, Ms. Carter. It's about responsibility. As president of the HOA, it's my job to ensure everyone follows the rules. You chose not to, so this is on you." The words hit Emily like a slap in the face. She glanced around, hoping someone, anyone, would step in to help, but the workers were focused on their task, avoiding eye contact while Karen stood firm, radiating authority. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains or peered over fences, too afraid to intervene. No one dared cross Karen, even when they knew she was wrong. Desperate, Emily pulled out her phone and called the police. She explained the situation as calmly as she could, though her voice trembled with emotion. "Someone is pouring cement into my pool without my permission," she told the dispatcher. "Please send someone immediately." While she waited for the authorities to arrive, Emily tried reasoning with the workers. "Look, I don't know who sent you here, but this isn't okay. You're vandalizing private property. Stop what you're doing before things get worse." One of the workers hesitated, glancing nervously at Karen. "We're just following orders, ma'am," he muttered, clearly uncomfortable. "If you've got a problem, take it up with the HOA." Emily spun back to Karen, her patience wearing thin. "Fine, tell them to stop, Karen, right now." Karen's smirk widened, almost daring Emily to push further. "Sorry, Ms. Carter. By the time the police get here, it'll already be done. Maybe next time you'll think twice before breaking the rules." Emily felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't undo the damage being done to her pool or bring justice to Karen's reckless behavior. Instead, she took a deep breath and reminded herself that this wasn't the end. Even if Karen thought she'd won, Emily wasn't about to give up. When the police finally arrived, the scene was chaotic. Cement trucks blocked the driveway, and the once beautiful pool was now a giant concrete block. Officers spoke with Emily first, jotting down notes as she explained the situation. Then they approached Karen, who greeted them with practiced confidence. "This is all perfectly legal," Karen insisted, waving a stack of papers in the air. "Our HOA guidelines clearly state that unsafe pools must be addressed. Since Ms. Carter failed to comply, we took action on behalf of the community." The officers exchanged skeptical glances but didn't argue. Without evidence proving otherwise, there wasn't much they could do. After advising both parties to seek legal counsel, they left, leaving Emily feeling defeated, but only momentarily. As soon as the police were gone, Emily marched straight to her car and drove to a local lawyer's office. She had done some research online and found an attorney specializing in property disputes and HOA conflicts. His name was Mr. Harris, and his reputation for standing up to abusive HOAs made him the perfect ally. Mr. Harris listened intently as Emily recounted the entire saga, from the yellow door fiasco to the solar panel drama and finally the cement-filled pool. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "This sounds like a textbook case of HOA abuse," he said after a pause. "From what you've described, Karen's actions go far beyond enforcing reasonable rules. Filling your pool with cement without proper justification is not only unethical, it's potentially illegal." Emily nodded eagerly. "That's exactly what I thought. Can we sue her? Or the HOA?" Mr. Harris smiled reassuringly. "Yes, we can, but first we'll need to gather evidence. Did you keep copies of all the letters and notices you received from the HOA?" "Yes, every single one," Emily replied, confidently. Over the past few months, she had meticulously organized every document related to her disputes with Karen. She handed the folder to Mr. Harris, who flipped through it with growing interest. "This is excellent," he said, nodding approvingly. "And what about witnesses? Anyone willing to testify about Karen's behavior?" Emily hesitated. Most of her neighbors were too scared to speak out, but she remembered the note she'd received after the last HOA meeting, the one thanking her for standing up to Karen. "There might be a few people," she admitted cautiously, "but I'll have to ask them privately." "That's a good start," Mr. Harris said. "In the meantime, I'll draft a formal complaint against the HOA and file for an injunction to prevent further damage to your property. Once we present our case in court, I believe we'll have a strong chance of winning." Leaving the lawyer's office, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. For the first time since discovering the cement in her pool, she allowed herself to imagine a future where Karen faced consequences for her actions. But she also knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Lawsuits took time, money, and effort, and Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. Back at home, Emily stared at the concrete block that used to be her pool. It was ugly, imposing, and utterly soul-crushing. Yet, as she stood there, she realized something important. This wasn't just about her anymore. Karen's behavior wasn't unique to Emily. It affected everyone in Willow Creek who lived under the shadow of fear and intimidation. If Emily could hold Karen accountable, she might inspire others to stand up for themselves too. With newfound determination, Emily began reaching out to her neighbors. She knocked on doors, shared her story, and encouraged them to join forces against Karen's tyranny. At first, many were hesitant, worried about retaliation or drawing unwanted attention. But slowly, curiosity turned to courage, and courage turned to action. By the end of the week, a small group of residents had formed a coalition dedicated to reforming the HOA. They met secretly in each other's homes, sharing stories of fines, threats, and unfair treatment at Karen's hands. Together, they vowed to support Emily in her lawsuit, not just for her sake, but for the sake of the entire community. Karen may have thought she'd won by pouring cement into Emily's pool, but she had underestimated one crucial thing: the power of resilience. Emily wasn't just fighting for her dream home anymore, she was fighting for freedom, fairness, and the right to live without fear. And she wasn't alone. The lawsuit against Karen and the HOA quickly became the talk of Willow Creek. News spread like wildfire, fueled by whispered conversations over backyard fences, grocery store aisles, and neighborhood dog walks. For years, residents had quietly endured Karen's iron-fisted rule, too afraid to speak out or challenge her authority. But now, with Emily taking a stand, and backed by a growing coalition of neighbors, they began to realize they weren't powerless after all. The tide was turning and Karen could feel it. Emily threw herself into preparing for the legal battle ahead. With Mr. Harris guiding her every step of the way, she gathered evidence that painted a damning picture of Karen's abuse of power. She photocopied every letter, fine, and notice she'd received from the HOA, creating a timeline of escalating harassment. She collected photos of her pool before and after the cement incident, along with receipts proving she'd installed proper fencing months earlier. Most importantly, she reached out to former victims of Karen's wrath, residents who had paid exorbitant fines or made costly changes to their homes under duress. One such neighbor was Mrs. Patel, an elderly woman who lived 2 streets down from Emily. Years ago, Karen had fined her $1,000 for planting marigolds in her front yard, a violation of the HOA's strict landscaping guidelines. Unable to afford the penalty, Mrs. Patel had been forced to remove the flowers and replace them with plain grass. When Emily visited her to ask if she'd testify, tears welled up in Mrs. Patel's eyes. "I wanted those flowers for my granddaughter," she explained, her voice trembling. She loved playing among them when she came to visit, but Karen said they were too bright and didn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood. I was so scared of what she might do next. Emily placed a comforting hand on Mrs. Patel's shoulder. "You don't have to be scared anymore," she said gently. "This isn't just about me, it's about all of us. If we stick together, we can stop her." Mrs. Patel nodded, wiping away her tears. "Count me in. It's time someone stood up to her." As more neighbors joined the fight, Emily felt a surge of hope. Each new ally brought fresh stories of injustice and renewed determination to hold Karen accountable. Together, they compiled affidavits detailing how Karen manipulated rules, falsified documents, and bullied residents into compliance. One man revealed that Karen had once threatened to foreclose on his home unless he repainted his garage door within 48 hours. Another shared how Karen had banned holiday decorations altogether after someone hung twinkling lights shaped like snowflakes, a decision that left many families heartbroken during the festive season. Armed with this mountain of evidence, Mr. Harris filed the lawsuit against Karen and the HOA. The complaint accused them of violating state laws protecting homeowners' rights, engaging in discriminatory practices, and causing intentional damage to private property. In addition to seeking financial compensation for the destruction of Emily's pool, the lawsuit demanded Karen's removal as HOA president and sweeping reforms to ensure fairness and transparency moving forward. Karen, however, wasn't about to go down without a fight. Upon receiving the summons, she immediately called an emergency HOA meeting, determined to rally support for her cause. The room buzzed with tension as residents filed in, unsure of what to expect. Some came out of loyalty to Karen, while others attended out of curiosity or fear of retaliation if they stayed away. "Let me make one thing perfectly clear," Karen announced, slamming her fist on the podium for emphasis. "This lawsuit is nothing more than a personal vendetta by Ms. Carter. She thinks she's above the rules, but I won't let her tear apart everything we've worked so hard to build here in Willow Creek." Her words were met with scattered applause, though many attendees remained silent, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Karen scanned the crowd, her gaze landing on Emily, who sat near the back with several members of the coalition. Their presence unnerved her, but she refused to show weakness. "This isn't about aesthetics or safety codes," Karen continued, her tone sharpening. "It's about protecting our community from chaos. Without structure and discipline, Willow Creek will descend into disorder. Is that what you want?" Before anyone could respond, Emily stood up, drawing everyone's attention. "Actually, Karen, it is about safety codes and how you've twisted them to punish people you don't like," she said firmly. "My pool didn't violate any rules. Neither did Mrs. Patel's marigolds or anyone else's so-called infractions. You've been using these guidelines as weapons to control us, and it needs to stop." Murmurs rippled through the audience as residents exchanged uneasy glances. Even some of Karen's staunchest supporters seemed hesitant, their loyalty wavering in the face of undeniable truth. Sensing an opportunity, Emily pressed further. "We're not asking for chaos, Karen. We're asking for fairness, for transparency, for the freedom to live in our own homes without living in fear of your next attack. If you truly cared about Willow Creek, you'd welcome these changes instead of fighting them." Karen's face flushed red with anger, but she quickly masked her emotions with a tight smile. "Very poetic, Miss Carter," she sneered. "But let's not forget who pays your bills around here. Without the HOA, this neighborhood would fall apart." "That's where you're wrong," Emily shot back. "The HOA exists to serve us, not the other way around. And if you can't understand that, then maybe it's time for someone else to take charge." Her words struck a nerve. A young couple sitting near the front raised their hands tentatively. "We agree with Emily," the husband said cautiously. "Things need to change, We moved here because we thought it would be a nice place to raise our kids, not because we wanted to live under constant scrutiny. Others chimed in, voicing similar sentiments. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Karen's grip on the neighborhood was slipping. Though she tried to maintain her composure, the cracks in her facade were beginning to show. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings moved forward at a steady pace. During depositions, Emily and her team uncovered shocking revelations about Karen's misconduct. Emails revealed that she had fabricated evidence to justify fining certain homeowners, while internal memos showed she routinely ignored violations committed by her friends and allies. Perhaps most damning of all was a recorded conversation between Karen and a contractor, in which she admitted ordering the destruction of Emily's pool purely out of spite. When these findings were presented in court, the judge wasted no time condemning Karen's actions. This level of vindictiveness has no place in any organization, let alone one meant to protect homeowners' interests, he declared sternly. Ms. Thompson's behavior constitutes gross negligence and abuse of power. Such conduct cannot, and will not, be tolerated. The ruling sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. Not only was Karen ordered to pay for the full restoration of Emily's pool, but she was also stripped of her position as HOA president. The court mandated sweeping reforms to the HOA's governance structure, including term limits for leadership roles, regular audits of financial records, and stricter oversight to prevent future abuses. For Emily, the victory was bittersweet. While she was thrilled to see justice served, she couldn't help but feel sadness for the years of stress and heartache caused by Karen's tyranny. Still, she took solace in knowing that her fight had sparked meaningful change, not just for herself but for everyone in the community. As news of the verdict spread, residents celebrated openly for the first time in years. Neighbors who had once avoided each other now exchanged warm smiles and friendly greetings. Flower beds bloomed in vibrant colors. Holiday lights twinkled cheerfully and laughter echoed through the streets once again. Willow Creek was finally free, and it was all thanks to Emily's courage and determination. But even as the neighborhood embraced its newfound freedom, Emily knew the real work was just beginning. Rebuilding trust, fostering unity, and ensuring accountability would take time and effort. Yet as she stood in her backyard watching workers break apart the concrete block that used to be her pool, she felt hopeful. The scars of the past would always remain, but so would the lessons learned and the promise of a brighter future.